Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Oscar, Ryan, and Will. Today, we're going to be discussing a masterpiece from a filmmaker who we can obviously argue is one of the greatest filmmakers ever, Steven Spielberg. A film that was once the highest grossing film in history. It changed the landscape of film forever with its innovations and its storytelling. And that film is Jurassic Park. So, for those of you who haven't seen the film, it's a film that we highly recommend you check out. It's one that I'm assuming many people have seen, but as time goes on, maybe you've been introduced to it through the Jurassic World franchise, but we recommend you don't judge based on those films and give this film a chance because it is a far superior film in every way to its sequels and what the franchise become as a whole. I actually personally see it more as a sequel to Jaws than I do the start of a new franchise because it's really Spielberg doing another monster movie. And unlike Jaws, where he had to keep the monster off screen due to his limitations, in this one, he really had free range to have the monster be on camera more and more of those kind of graphic shots that he wasn't able to do with Jaws. And yeah, the cultural impact of this film is just unmatched in many ways. Like the boom of dinosaurs and in popular culture, mainly for I think all of us when we were growing up, and we grew up in the 90s or the 2000s, and probably still today. Kids love dinosaurs, and this film is really part of what led that uh, kind of boom of in the media of dinosaur content with films like We're Back and a bunch of others that followed. So Ryan, what do you think? What are some reasons why you think the audience should check out Jurassic Park if they haven't already gotten the chance to watch?
Yeah, Steven Spielberg in general is probably someone that at least I do maybe take him for granted with the amount of great films he's made, and Jurassic Park is one of those that I probably didn't give it the full merit that it deserved until this watch. Really, I didn't hold it quite at the top of Spielberg's filmography because it was just mostly childhood memories I had of it. But although this is definitely a film that merits its status as a staple in blockbuster cinema in general, and I somehow managed to enjoy it even more than as a kid because Spielberg just directs the shit out of it in general, and it's just so hugely ahead of its time in visual effects. So it's a perfect blend of genres, and it's just an insanely fun time. So you should definitely give it a chance. I'm sure most people have seen it, but you should definitely go and see it if you haven't. But yeah, it's just a truly mind blowing film that is great and ingrained in pop culture, and somehow is even the best in his filmography. Somehow, in fact, it's not even the best film he made that year. I'd say, of course, it was competing with Schindler's List at the Oscars and everything with his own film, which is just crazy. But yeah, well, what do you think about the film?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Jurassic Park is such a staple in any film watcher's journey. Spielberg is just like one of those directors that manages to hit on every genre across every single decade he's been working. And Spielberg was kind of my dad's favorite director, and he introduced me to a lot of films. So I definitely saw a lot of his films growing up. I've seen Jurassic Park about every year, all my childhood growing up. So it does kind of have that special place in my heart in terms of like influence. Um, yeah, and then in terms of like Spielberg and his impact, like his critical acclaim is pretty through the roof. Like he's got 22 Oscar nominations and 3 wins. So like when you're coming to a Spielberg movie, it's gonna bang. And Jurassic Park's absolutely no different. Like Ryan said, it definitely sits at a top or among the top of his best films. Definitely something you guys should check out if you haven't seen already. But you probably have seen it, so I'm excited to talk about it and go through it. It's such a dense movie to break down and talk about, so I'm pumped to go through it with you guys. But Oscar, what are your early impressions?
Yeah, I think that, like Alex said, the culture impact of this film is just insane. I'm sure every one of us here went through like a dinosaur phase when we were younger, and that's primarily because of this film. Honestly, I think that's what sparked it. It's just so iconic. The general public love it. Everybody loves it. I've never really heard anyone who doesn't really like it that much. Um, and I think that's kind of Spielberg as a whole. I think everyone has one of his films they just adore. For me, Jaws is his masterpiece, but I honestly think this is his second best film. Is he just has such a great sense of adventure, and this just carries on through and through of this. I hadn't seen it in years, but I got chills multiple times in multiple scenes watching this film. It was so great to see. Alex?
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So I think to start out, we're going to talk about a couple characters, and Actually, before we get into that, I just want to say one cool thing I read or heard in one of the commentaries from behind the scenes is that Spielberg actually, so as a kid, because of this movie, I got a big interest in dinosaurs, and I would go to the Natural Museum of History in Philadelphia, and I later found out that that was actually where Spielberg grew up going, and that sparked his interest of dinosaurs. So the fact that he went to the same museum that I went to growing up, and that actually sparked his inspiration, which then sparked mine, I just thought it was really cool. But let's get right into characters. So the character I have the most interest in speaking on is John Hammond, who is definitely the antagonist of the film, but he's not necessarily a villain. He's more just someone who is in opposition with the main characters. And I think he's such a fascinating character because, one, his character's so relevant with many things we see today, but he's a very understandable character, even though we disagree with him. And there's a lot of ideas about, creation, and what he's been able to create is truly just a remarkable accomplishment. Like, imagine someone who was smart enough and was actually able to bring dinosaurs back. It's definitely one of the peak of, human accomplishments. But at the same time, there's the question of it's like Dr. Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, says, it's like, can we build it? Yes, but should we? And that's why it creates such an interesting conflict. And right after we have this disagreement meeting about it, we then are introduced to Dr. Hammond's grandchildren, which really makes that conflict of whether they should versus could very personal to him, which makes it interesting. But at the same time, the dinosaurs are also Hammond's children as well, because, his blood is in the dinosaurs. He spent years of his life creating them, and they're also his children the same way that his grandchildren are, which makes it even more of a difficult decision for him. And after the first attack, when even his grandchildren are attacked by the T-Rex, he doubles down on it in the meeting with Ellie, played by Laura Dern, because you have to think, whereas the audience are watching it thinking, obviously, you got to shut the park down. Like, this is a terrible idea. Look what's happened. Like, we can't be doing this. But if you see things from Hammond's perspective, he's probably spent years and years building this idea. From his perspective, he's been able to create all of this. He's resurrected dinosaurs, an extinct species from the earth. The idea that he could fix the problem is really not that crazy if you're looking at it from his perspective, considering what he's accomplished so far. And it really creates this big dilemma of, when it's time to jump ship versus fixing the problem. And it's a very interesting conversation between him and Laura Dern with two characters who have kind of understandable points of view on the conflict. And there really is a lot of conflicts just about the idea of human beings playing God and, just the evolution of life on Earth as itself. And I think, this year we saw Oppenheimer as the biggest movie of the year. And in this film, if any of you have rewatched it since then, you'll see a picture of Oppenheimer on the computer. And I think it's interesting because they're both two people who created these incredible world-changing achievements of mankind in terms of creations that might not have necessarily had a positive effect on the world, despite the accomplishment of just being able to do them, which makes for just a lot of interesting commentary on the idea of human beings play God and, where the creation, whether you should versus you could. But, Will, did you have any thoughts on any of the characters you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, totally. I think you absolutely nailed that philosophical side of Hammond's character and just their whole dynamic there, and Goldblum kind of being the voice of reason or like that voice of God. I think you're totally right with everything you're saying there. But I'm going to switch pace to kind of Dr. Allen, a different character, and the relationship he has with the kids. And I thought that was probably my favorite dynamic, or among my favorite dynamics throughout. And it's a dynamic that I didn't really pick up on or resonate with until like this watch or maybe a watch before. Because when I was a bit younger, I kind of didn't really understand it as so much. But now I kind of have a wider perspective on it. But they really drive home this fact that Dr. Allen does not want kids. He hates kids. He despises kids. Off the rip, there's that kid that comes to the dig site because he's an archaeologist. And he basically tries to put the fear of God into him. And he just detests kids, basically. And then there's this pretty gradual arc throughout his time at Jurassic Park when the grandkids come spend time on the island. And we kind of see him kind of evolve into this father figure. Obviously, there's that amazing scene where he gets stuck in the tree with the car and the two kids. And that just kind of, I'd say that's like a decent turning point for him as a character. And I just think that character is so perfectly written, considering the arc it takes. There's a lot of setup and payoff, which I think is just really good filmmaking from Spielberg, in the sense that they kind of foreshadow it subtly. It's not thrown in your face, but it's definitely foreshadowed. It's not some crazy, all of a sudden he's saving kids from trees. It kind of, it lingers through and happens pretty naturally. So just his character, I thought was really interesting from that perspective. But Oscar, I don't know if you had any comments about that.
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoy Malcolm's character because he doesn't have kind of that dynamic with kind of another character specifically. He kind of works really well as a whole for all the characters. He's kind of obviously the comic relief side of the film, and I think even as a screenplay, this film, I think just the balance and the comedic timing of Jeff Goldblum and the way he's directed is really, really brilliant. And even in kind of the darkest moments of this film, he still manages to impress really, really well. Especially kind of moving kind of on from him. There's with some of the characters later on, you got the scene with what dinosaur is it? I can't remember, but the injured dinosaur on the floor, and I think that's another kind of good turning point from the argument that they had earlier on. Kind of can brings more kind of the humane side of things into the argument, and I think that was another really, really key scene to the film. But I think it's quite funny how the first stop in the dinosaur tour, after the argument they've had how it shouldn't be done, there's just nothing there. They just can't see anything at all. And that's, to be honest, that's like 90% of the ride as you go around. There's nothing there to see. But yeah, just so well done throughout. Ryan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, but the cast in this movie is just insane. Like, we have Laura Dern, is never an Oscar-winning actress. We've got Sam Neill, very underrated actor, I'd say. He's got a lot of good horror films to his career. And then, of course, Richard Attenborough. Of course, I had quite a lot of rivalry with Spielberg, and he still casts him in his film. But yeah, he's such a fun character in this movie, like Alex was saying. But I have a problem with his performance because this man's meant to be from Scotland and he has a Scottish accent at the start and it just slowly goes away, and by the end he's a very posh, like, English man, and it's not the greatest performance. It's a very fun performance, I'd say, but that really bugged me. That was something I noticed. And it's also a problem with Sam Neill as well. He's from New Zealand, I think. He kept switching between accents as well, but Hammond's definitely stood out to me. But yeah, he's such a great character. Like, just this negligence that he has, like, towards the whole park. Like, he's so confident that everything's gonna work, leaving his grandkids on a tour, that doesn't even have any guards or precautions really about for anything that could go wrong. Like, he's just fully confident that everything's gonna go their way and nothing's gonna go wrong. But yeah, such an interesting character, especially when contrasted with Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum's character. Like, it just holds very different values and disagrees with everything, like every decision that Hammond's made, like, so far. And I mean, Spielberg even contrasts them visually. Like, Hammond's wearing a fully white outfit and Malcolm's just wearing full black. Like, just from everything he's thought about just contrasts the two characters. But yeah, I've been thinking Jeff Goldblum's definitely my favourite character in the film, and I've been thinking about why he's even there in the first place. It confuses me because they brought in all these, like, paleontologists. Like, that makes sense. That's the first people you'd bring into this island. But then Jeff Goldblum's, like, a mathematician, like, chaos theorist. Like, why is he there even at all? Like, of course he's there for the themes of the film about, like, life finding a way and not able to control, like, all the human error and how it leads to the bad things that happen. But what was the actual logic of bringing him in the film? It makes no sense. But
I think it's kind of like he's there as, like, one of those island checkers. Like, that lawyer that gets killed, he gets massacred. And then I think he's kind of, like, supposed to be one of those people who's checking the island, but, he's really definitely the philosophical opposition to Hammond. But yeah, interesting point. He kind of just appears in moments and then delivers really good lines of dialogue. But yeah, interesting perspective.
Yeah, why are you picking, like, a chaos theorist for all the people that you could bring into your, like, dinosaur island
Yeah,
for the first
literally.
time, though?
I was gonna say every time he brings up that chaos thing, it's a really dark concept, but every time he says that, I just start laughing because it's the most random thing ever, and it's just so funny.
Yeah, he's such a good character.
Yeah,
that's all I
he's
had to say.
definitely one of the best characters. He's also hilarious. Like, the scene where Hammond's like, I really hate that man. Like, it's hilarious every time. Like, when he's just talking to himself in the car, he's hilarious and adds so much comedy to the film.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
iconic pose as well when he's just lying down. His like shirt. It's so funny.
Yeah, he's got so many moments where he just like is talking to himself, but it's just like such like a philosophical perspective or such like an overarching perspective of the whole situation. Yeah, he definitely adds balance to the Jurassic Park island for sure.
But yeah, I think kind of moving forward away from characters, I think a major theme of the film is this idea of defying nature. And, you know, in contrast with a filmmaker like Martin Scorsese, who makes very urban films for the most part, Spielberg grew up like in Arizona around nature. And I think nature has always been a big part of his films. And he's someone who likes to comment on very big world-changing ideas, kind of like a Christopher Nolan today. They're both very large-scale filmmakers who like to comment on very big ideas. And there's just from the very first shot of this film, there's this theme of defying nature with Oscar, you all good?
No, it's okay. I thought I had to go do something, but it's all good. Sorry.
All good. Just from the very first shot of the film, there's this theme of defying nature with it's a bunch of bushes, and then we see them being chopped down by humans. And just the very first shot of the film emphasizes this theme of defying nature, and it's constantly kind of touched on throughout the film, a lot through Jeff Goldblum's lines and Grant's line of like when they're feeding the T-Rex and he's like, the T-Rex doesn't want to be fed, it wants to hunt. And there's just always this kind of taking things out of the environment of like humans and dinosaurs are not supposed to share the same environment. The dinosaur isn't supposed to be in a cage like a zoo animal. And there's kind of this, it's almost like they're rearranging the food pyramid also as well. And things like when we see the first birth of a raptor where the egg is hatched, John Williams' score has like a choir to it, almost like a church choir. And I feel like it's this very kind of symbolic element of like just evolution. And evolution is definitely another idea that the film touches on, which is very interesting because this is one of the first films to use CGI in such a big scale way and really showcase what CGI could do. So it's interesting how Steven Spielberg is commenting on evolution as he's evolving the craft of film itself. And it's how much that really just seeing the dinosaurs in CGI set off such a chain reaction in the industry with then seeing so many CGI films in years to come. Like, you know, we had Starship Troopers, the Star Wars prequels, and so many more. So I think just those two themes of evolution and the idea of defying nature are really big and interesting ideas that Spielberg comments on in very interesting ways. But Oscar, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, just one quick thing on defying nature. I think it's really clever. Towards the end, obviously, kind of one of the final shots with the T-Rex, how he kind of takes the place of the fossil skeleton that was there before, and I think that's just such a kind of it moment, and he displays it in such a clear way. Of what it means. But yeah, as a whole, obviously, themes of there's just kind of shots of like open fences and torn down fences throughout this film, which just push that kind of define nature theme even further on. Will, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, totally. I just kind of want to circle back to Spielberg as a filmmaker, and I think this is maybe his most intricately made film, and that's kind of tough to say considering how flawless a lot of his films are. But Jurassic Park, right from the jump, kind of plays like a horror movie, right? We get this dinosaur arriving at the island. Everything's dark. The mood has already been set, and we see these crew members essentially get massacred by the dinosaur. But an interesting decision that Spielberg makes is he doesn't actually show the dinosaur at all. He doesn't really show the dinosaur killing the guy gruesomely or anything. He kind of leaves it up for the audience's interpretation. And that's like a common trope used in horror. There's this kind of overwhelming feeling that the audience can conjure something more gruesome and dangerous than you can show on the screen. So it's a really good technique to kind of avert the eyes completely. And I think he does that really well consecutively. We see that again when they're feeding the cow to the dinosaur. You don't really see it. You kind of just see the end result of it, which I think is a really powerful way of driving that fear, tension, and just the power of the dinosaurs in general. And then going back to Hammond's character, I just wanted to add, Alex brought up so many good points. I think another really good piece of symbolism is the fact that Hammond has this cane that he uses throughout the entire film, and at the top of the cane is that mosquito that started it all, and it is in the palm of his hands essentially for the entire film. He literally has the palm of his hands on this baby, this mosquito, the thing that started everything. So I think that goes hand in hand with Alex's saying, with his connection to the dinosaurs and his connection to the island. Again, reinforcing the strength of his character and the technician behind Spielberg's writing and execution here. But yeah, just cementing Spielberg as one of the greatest filmmakers, just with the little things, right? But Ryan, did you have anything to say about Spielberg or Jurassic Park?
Yeah, just adding on to that point about Spielberg, just another scene that was really great when they first see the dinosaurs. It really like emphasizes Spielberg's genius, like holding on to the characters for a long time, like building up the scene before they actually reveal like this humongous beast that really does require like all the screen space that it does give them. And I don't think any of the sequels kind of replicate that scale between the humans and the dinosaurs again. So it really just shows how a genius Spielberg was. He truly was like a master of just framing his scenes. But yeah, I think you summed up all the points really well. I don't have anything else to add.
I just something quick to add. Going back to what Alex was saying about defying nature, and Will mentioned earlier about foreshadowing, but just the kind of, there's a lot in the script that's mentioned earlier on how they think the raptors are going to move like this, they're going to kill you from the side, and kind of they think they've kind of got them sussed out before they see the dinosaurs. And then there's a lot of foreshadowing, because in the end a lot of them actually get killed by the way, especially that the raptor leader, he kind of says that, I can't remember the line exactly, I think it's like clever girl or something, just before he gets killed by the raptor, who comes in at the side, just like I think it was Grant mentioned earlier in the beginning of the film. And I think that's just so well done. I think this is quite underrated as a screenplay as well. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's just really a really impressive balance of comedic timing, but it's just so uncomfortable to watch. The jump scares are really good in this, because I'd forgotten a lot of them and they actually got me pretty good. But yeah, anything else to add?
Yeah, kind of building off of what Will said, Spielberg is so great at this kind of off-screen suggestion rather than always showing everything on camera and delaying the reveals. And he does such a good job of, he's one of the best directors ever, maybe at directing faces, by his ability to his ability to trigger the imagination of both the audience, but also his actors. You can see his actors like thinking and imagining things. For example, when it's towards the end, when they finally get the system up and running and there's the call with Hammond while the rest of them are under attack from the raptors in the lobby, and Hammond hears the fear in his head, and even though the characters are kind of closer to safety, Hammond's imagining, what could be happening as he hears them running from the raptors. And he's just always placing the imagination in the mind of both the audience and the characters themselves, along with the actors who portray them. And one thing he frequently does to kind of suggest the presence of dinosaurs, there's only about 15 minutes of on-screen dinosaurs in the film, which is more than we see the shark in Jaws, but considering this is over a 2-hour film, that's very impressive that it's so memorable with the dinos, considering we only see them for a limited amount of time. And what he often does is just have things shake. When things shake, that normally is what he's using to create the fear, whether it's the bushes when they're feeding the raptors, or the way the girl shakes the Jell-O, or the way the water glass shakes in the T-Rex scene. And, we'll touch more on the T-Rex scene in depth in a little bit, but just constantly when things shake, that's Spielberg's way of creating the fear in the mind and implying the presence of a dinosaur or some form of danger normally. But even though this is a dinosaur movie, he does such a great job of also creating high-stakes conflicts even when there are no dinosaurs. For example, the T-Rex scene first, that they're attacked by the T-Rex, which, like I said, we'll talk later, but after... there's that whole suspense scene just with the car hanging when they're on the wires, and then after they're safe from the T-Rex when it's falling out of the tree. And another one when there's the electric fence conflict, and we're cross-cutting between them restarting the power and Grant climbing the fence with the kids. And it starts with Grant kind of just doing like the comedic fake out of getting electrocuted, which is like a fun comedic joke beat in the beginning. But what it does is it's putting the idea of the fence electrocuting one of them in our mind for when it's actually a threat soon after. And then he does, one thing Spielberg likes to do is he moves the camera slowly in a suspenseful way where we're not sure where it's going, and then once it finally lands on something, it has an impact, which is just brilliant visual storytelling. And he does that here by moving to that light, which is like the signal that the power's on, to remind us without saying any words that, oh, wow, like if this fence goes on while they're climbing it, like they're going to get shocked. And, just another small moment, like we have, of course, the glass shake with the T-Rex, but then later with Jeff Goldblum's character, it tilts down to that puddle, and for so long we just wait, and we know that water shaking is the presence of the T-Rex, and we know it's coming just by the way the camera slowly moves down there away from him, and we're just waiting for it now. Like, we're just anticipating the suspense before it even actually comes. So, yeah, Steven Spielberg is one of the greatest filmmakers ever at creating suspense and off-screen suggestion as a whole. I'll pass it off to Ryan.
Yeah, I'd just like to add something about the creating kind of the tension. Like, a lot of the scenes, Spielberg kind of likes to set like a timer that the audience like knows about. Like during the first one he does is, I don't remember his name, but the engineer that's away to the docks to deliver the DNA of the dinosaurs. Like, we know there's a set time on that, and I think it really does add to the tension already, like from the start for the whole scene. And then like that gate electrocuted fence scene you were talking about as well. We can see the scene, the end from Laura Dern's character turning on the power. So there's kind of that timer before we see that it's fully electrocuted as well. So he's just constantly setting out like a kind of I say a time before like something's gonna happen, which really sets up that tension well. But Will, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, totally. I think Jurassic Park is exceptional in the way it uses camera movement, framing, and composition. Kind of piggybacking on what Alex said, there's a lot of camera pans that Spielberg kind of uses as a crutch. That's easily his favorite camera movement, up, down, left, right, whatever. That just the pan is such a subtle but effective way of drawing from one composition to another. And the most influential or powerful one was definitely at the beginning when Laura Dern sees the first dinosaur. It's the dinosaur that's eating from the trees, and we kind of get this pan up to Dr. Allen's character, and he's in complete shock. The composition is perfect. Camera moves down again, and then we get the exact same pan as he tilts the head of Ellie to look at the dinosaur. And it's just a perfect way of keeping everything tight and in frame, but still showing the scale and just kind of the awe of the entire experience, you could say. Yeah, and then additionally, there's another. Spielberg is definitely a director who is by the books. He's a big guy. He's a big director that values, setup and payoff. And that's so evident in Jurassic Park. We can circle back to a couple points that you guys already talked about. The electrical fence is definitely a great example. Dr. Allen does the fake electrocution that puts it in your mind that it might be coming. He goes back to it. There's a scene that's really tense with that. Oscar mentioned earlier, there's the bones that are hanging from the foyer of the Jurassic Park entrance, and it's the bones of the T-Rex. Later in the film, the bones come crashing down when a real T-Rex upholds that spot. So there's just kind of like this setup and payoff all over the place. There's another one when they first get to Jurassic Park, when they're getting into the Jeeps for the first time. Dr. Allen goes to do his seatbelt, but he has two male ends. He can't even tie his seatbelt correctly. Again, showing up like how foreshadowing how safety might have been an oversight. So again, this idea of setting up, paying off, setting up, paying off, and foreshadowing in a way that is so subtle yet so effective. It's just really a treat to watch. And you picked up on it subtly, whether you notice this or not. Your mind's doing it automatically. So I think that's just what sets Spielberg apart, and he's just one of the best directors when it comes to by the book storytelling, and I really respect him for that. One of the greatest in my eyes, for sure. Alex, I'll kick it back to you.
I just want to add, sorry. Adding on to the suspense, I think it's just so well done throughout. I like how you kind of start with the most peaceful dinosaur, is really, really big, but it's an incredible scene. One of my favorites, honestly. I got chills the first time watching it. And then as they start the tour, like I mentioned earlier, they show nothing. There's nothing out there. They go through a few ones, and they even go through the T-Rex and then see nothing. And it's just that built up of throughout. Like Alex said, the dinosaurs have such limited screen time in this film, but that's just so well done, not showing anything at first, and then you kind of get the big reveal of the T-Rex, which isn't even the first big one, kind of the biggest one showing, because you get the injured one first, which I think just so good. And then adding on to the electrical fence, I had actually completely forgotten about this film, and I think he does a really good job of kind of subverting expectations, because as the kid's kind of going down the fence, I'm thinking, he's not going to do this. He's not going to have a child get electrocuted with so many volts. And it ends up happening, and I think, I don't know, that scene really, really shocked me and caught me off guard. And adding onto the camera movement, how Alex said before, he kind of started really slow pans to the lights, and then all of a sudden it electrocutes. It's just one quick pan as the kid flies off the electric fence, and I think that was a really good kind of quick change in camera movement, but really, really effective. Yeah, back to you, Alex.
Sorry, I just wanted to hop in and say one more thing about the camera and scale. I think a lot of movies nowadays, with CGI especially, when filmmakers can get this grand, sweeping, kind of aerial drone shot, you lose a sense of the scale of some humans, or in this case, dinosaurs. And I think what grounds Jurassic Park and Spielberg so well is that a lot of the perspective is on the floor, tight camera shots. You're never really seeing the full scale of the dinosaur. And when you do, it's the best scene in the damn movie, when he's waving the flare from side to side, trying to avert the T-Rex. So you really get that scale by Spielberg selectively choosing how much of the frame he's going to show when he's putting the dinosaurs in there. Like in Marvel movies, you get very carried away when you got this like massive scale and you can kind of see everything. It almost kind of reduces the impact and the size of these creatures. And going back to the footsteps, the water shaking in there, it gives you a sense of scale, size, fear. So I forgot to say that. I just wanted to say that real quickly. But Alex, back to you, man.
Sorry, adding on to Will's, quickly, I think it's quite impressive. I kind of remembered this differently, but the scale on this is kind of a bit smaller than you kind of realize. It's just tight within a park, and I think that's where kind of the sequels lose some of the magic, because a lot of them kind of, they just fall away from the park, and it ends up being all over Earth and things like that. And I think that's what Spielberg does so well. He kind of creates this grounded story that feels so big, but yet is in such a confined area in small spaces. Yeah, back to you, Alex.
Yeah, building off some of the things that you guys said, like Will talked about the seatbelt, where it's the two receiving ends, which is meant to imply like both kind of female ends, how all the dinosaurs are female, but then Grant ties it together, which also is kind of the metaphor of how life always finds a way and nature always finds a way, because we learn that the dinosaurs eventually do learn how to reproduce on their own, despite the fact that originally they think that they can't. And like Oscar said about how he didn't think that it would really shock the kid, I love how typically in a lot of more cliche films, what they'll do is have this thing of like, no, I don't want to do it. No, you have to. And like they just delay it to the last second. Then of course he jumps. But I like how he never went with the cliche, like last minute jump, like he actually got shocked there. But yeah, moving forward, obviously Jurassic Park is one of the most big scale films ever. And Steven Spielberg is a by the book filmmaker, arguably the best by the book filmmaker of all time. But, people say, a lot of people don't understand why some people who are more into film have certain criticisms about franchises like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example. And I think Jurassic Park is a textbook example of what big-scale Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking can be that I don't see from a lot of the Marvel films. And I'll touch on some of the differences between them. To start, there's no coverage in Jurassic Park. And what I mean by that is they're not just shooting a conversation from a bunch of different angles and then just like patching it together in the editing room, like the best little bits and pieces. Like all the story beats are pre-planned. All of the shot design is pre-planned to heighten that specific story moment as best as possible. Every shot and, cut in this film is very precise and calculated from Spielberg. And, a lot of things that we don't see big budget films do anymore, like delaying those reveals, like creating the imagination in your mind rather than just showing everything on screen like we talked about recently. But also there's, Spielberg is, despite being more of an entertainer necessarily than artistic expression. There is so much artistic expression in this film, and there's so much visual symbolism with these images that always mean more than you might realize on screen. For example, the way he uses mud. Like at the end, we have the Jurassic Park logo on all this like consumer items and a gift shop and all that. And at the end on the Jeep, we see the doors just covered in mud right before they leave the island, which really symbolizes a lot. Another example being how there's this talk about dinosaur DNA and all that, and we have that projected on top of the raptors. And there's some more examples we'll get into a little later, like also the seatbelt thing. And there's always a lot of visual expression there's more to the images than just, we need to show this to move the story forward. There's a lot of commentary and telling the story by speaking through images rather than having the characters say everything in the dialogue is what really separates Spielberg from other blockbuster filmmakers. Another thing he does that we don't see a lot of other blockbuster directors do is he tells the story a lot with non-human things. And some examples of these are in the beginning when Dennis Nedry, who is one of the antagonists who sells the ideas of the park to a competitor and really sets a lot of the conflicts in motion, when he meets with someone in the beginning of the film, we see this guy walk up, we're curious who he is, but Spielberg pans with the briefcase because he knows that the briefcase and the ideas inside of it are what really matters in this scene. This random character is not what's important. Another example being like when the T-Rex is revealed to Grant and Goldblum, the wires snap, and he just uses all of these non-human things to tell his story rather than just constantly having humans talk and let the audience know in dialogue what the conflict is. He's very show don't tell, which is something I wish that we saw more in the big scale films of today. And also things like he puts the camera where something is going to be. Like the camera sometimes arrives before the subject or the action does. And just all of these brilliant smaller visual storytellings that you might not notice when you're watching them, but they make a difference in the way you perceive and experience the film is just what makes him the best big scale filmmaker of all time, in my opinion. And just truly someone who, although, because there also is the criticisms of the people who lean in the art house direction of that he's not as artistic of a filmmaker as, Martin Scorsese or an Ingmar Bergman or those types of directors. But I think he belongs in the conversation with all of the great visual storytellers and artistic filmmakers as a whole. So I'll pass it off to Will.
Yeah, I was just gonna funny that you mentioned that. I was gonna say I do kind of see Spielberg as an artistic director, and a lot, how a lot of people say style is substance, or there's no really critique. There's many ways to make a film, and I think the way that Spielberg does it is poetically artistic. I think the amount he's able to foreshadow, set up, payoff is artistic in a sense. Maybe it's no Wong Kar-wai, where you have these aesthetic atmospheres, but it's still very artistic in its own right. So to call Spielberg not an artistic director, I think is a bad take. But I think you kind of summed up everything there. I don't have much to add on in terms of Spielberg being the great filmmaker that he is, but I'll hand it right back to Ryan.
Yeah, like you're saying, this idea that great directors shouldn't be making these blockbusters is exactly where we went wrong. And with new films, it's just anybody can direct them. We should be having artistic directors making these, even the kind of popular films that you may consider that shouldn't be artistic like that, but we definitely should have them doing those. And I think it really emphasizes that in the Jurassic Park sequels. There's so many shots that they just tried to steal straight from Jurassic Park and replicate that magic that Spielberg has, and it's an impossible task, and it's just not possible. But yeah, I think one of the things that Spielberg does to make his blockbusters so special is that, like Alex was saying, that there is only 15 minutes of dinosaurs in this film. Dinosaurs are secondary to the human story, and that's really what modern blockbusters should have taken from Jurassic Park. It's not all about the action and the dinosaurs, but although they are cool, but it's so effective because they're rooted in a human story. And throughout Jurassic Park, there's just so many strong allegories for parenthood throughout the film. Like Will was saying earlier, we started the film with Spielberg opening scene with Dr. Grant and Ellie, just sets up Sam Neill not being quite ready to have kids, and whereas Laura Dern is ready and she is trying to encourage him, and he constantly brings this up throughout the film. Like in our second dinosaur scene, like Spielberg doesn't just show us off this like cool animatronic like Triceratops just to show off a cool dinosaur. It's to show off how Ellie already has these like maternal instincts already, and she has that nature of wanting to look after it. And there's so many pregnancy parallels in this scene, like Alan putting his ear to the Triceratops belly. It's like listening to like a pregnant woman's belly, or yeah, there's just so many allegories throughout the film. And then back to this T-Rex that Alex brought up, like that is just really what motivates the key changes in Alan's like the key changes in Alan like throughout the film, like in the tour scene. It comes between him and the kids. We'll get to that in the T-Rex scene, but that kind of really motivates his like the start of his change to being a really like a maternal father or like father figure in their life, and it really forces him and the kids away from the rest of the group, where Alan begins to become more of a father figure to them, and it really just elevates the movie so much, just having these human stories that you can like see the film through, and it's not just about the dinosaur and action. But yeah, Oscar, what did you have to add?
Yeah, kind of branching off what others are saying about kind of Spielberg as a director as a whole and kind of the way he makes his films. Kind of face value for me, his films are kind of incredible to watch. I think they're brilliant, but I think they just get increased. I like them just even more when you see sequels that have been made where he's not directing from kind of the films like Indiana Jones and kind of the later Jurassic Worlds, and you just see how little life they have in those films. And I think it's that big difference that it's just that bigger difference from the sequels to the originals that just makes him such a good director, because every time I see kind of a Jurassic World sequel or an Indiana Jones sequel where he's not directing, it's just, this film just needs Spielberg. Every time they're just crying out for Spielberg, it just loses that sense of adventure, and I think that just makes him such a good director in that sense. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah, I totally agree that when Spielberg makes a franchise, even though he did the sequel to this, which isn't as good, you always really feel his absence. Like in Indiana Jones especially, you really feel his absence so much in the new Dial of Destiny 1. But yeah, and I just quickly want to touch on a couple different ways Spielberg brilliantly tells this story. There's a lot of ones I'm going to go through, so I'm just going to rapid fire through them real quick. The first would be the way Steven Spielberg uses the sun. Like I mentioned, he grew up in Arizona, and I think he was a Boy Scout or an Eagle Scout or something like that, and he has a great understanding of where the sun's going to be. He almost uses it like a weapon. Like in the scene where they're in that canyon in Grant's first scene, just the way the sun's perfectly framed in this shot is a brilliant example of how he uses the sun. Like I said, he also is used to working in big open spaces, being from Arizona. And in a lot of his films, you'll see a signature shot of his where characters are walking up a hill, and like multiple hills as like multiple planes. He uses that here with that herd of dinosaurs. And that's kind of where he uses that there. Another one where in the very beginning, before we see dinosaurs, and the very opening scene with that case with the raptors, just how grand the presence feels, and the way the overexposed light streams come out of it with kind of like a smokiness to them, and just this very grand presence of the case before we even see a dinosaur. And he loves, like, obviously those long light streams like we see in the meeting scene, which just gives a dialogue-heavy scene more visual interest to it for sure. And another thing is the way he deals with exposition, where, you know, exposition is obviously very boring. And I'll be honest, some of the opening scenes of this film don't hold up as well for an at-home watch, where, you know, you're fighting for the audience's attention early on rather than in a theater where you're committed to the film for at least like 30. Like, no one's going to walk out of the film in the first 30 minutes. But the way he builds the intrigue of the dinosaurs by revealing the first dinosaur before giving us the exposition. And then what he does, he even makes it interesting by making it a theme park ride and having a kid-friendly animation. Like, Mr. DNA was iconic as a kid. And by making an animation for the exposition, it actually makes it enjoyable and fun, even for the kids watching, rather than just having the characters talk about it in a way that is not very interesting, especially to kids, which are a big part of the audience of this film. And he also uses the camera very vertically here. He likes to point it in very high angles and very low angles. Some examples would be when they first enter the gates of Jurassic Park, it's this very low grand angle, and then as they go through, he cuts to almost a vertically looking down angle. Another example would be the air vent scene with the raptors towards the end when the raptor jumps up. So it's interesting, not many filmmakers use the camera vertically the way he does. He also is brilliant at using depth and subtly using longer lenses, which kind of compress the frame. I won't get into technical aspects of that too much, but just the way he uses depth in kind of more tight compositions is something that you don't see as much in mainstream films from other filmmakers. The tactics used by the characters are just so brilliant, like the way Lex outsmarts the Raptors by the reflection and calling their attention, and then it hits the reflection rather than we think it's her. And we're even misdirected by that, like the Raptors are, which is just some brilliant, another moment. So much brilliance in this film, but he likes to push in on characters who are often moving still and just have a slowly moving phase reaction. And he also likes to obstruct the frame. He likes to obstruct your view of things often. An example more subtly is, like I said, we'll get to the T-Rex soon, but the way the rainy, wet windshields and windows kind of subtly obstructs our view of the T-Rex. He loves to obstruct the frame. And he also just like this kind of calm, slow-moving tension. And the last one I'll talk about is just kind of emphasizing how Grant doesn't want kids, is he has this incredible long take, which is a very subtly long dialogue take where it moves through the car and all around as the kid Tim is like, he's like looks up to Grant and Grant wants nothing to do with him, and just the visual actions of like slamming the door on him and then he's cut off by Lex, and just the way that scene flows all within one take so subtly that you probably didn't even realize it was one take just further emphasizes the brilliant storytelling of Steven Spielberg. But I'll pass it off to Oscar.
Yeah, so kind of branching off from a few points that you made, talking about kind of the sun, I think his use of like 9 days brilliant, because obviously the fear starts to set in at dusk and the weather gets a lot worse, and then kind of when the darkness is there, the night time is when kind of the chaos begins, and I think that's really clever. And it also leads to some amazing kind of use of lighting at night, and we'll get into a bit with the T-Rex scene, which is really clever. And adding on to your thing of misdirection, I think he uses the dinosaurs as a clever choice of misdirection as well. Because one scene that I always remembered as a child was the scene where I can't remember his name again, but where the villain gets killed by that frilled dinosaur that spits poison on him. Because you kind of go up and he looks like, oh, it's this nice little dinosaur. He's really small. He doesn't look dangerous, and then kind of out of nowhere, he gets killed in kind of a quite a violent way, really, and that scene stuck with me as a child so much. But yeah, I think that's just a really clever use of mixed direction for that. Will, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's just another setup and payoff. They talk about those dinosaurs who spit in people's eyes and blind them. Happens later on in the movie. But yeah, you could just see examples like that through all out, and I think that just kind of exemplifies the competence of Spielberg as a filmmaker. But I kind of wanted to touch on how Jurassic Park, well, it is kind of rooted in the drama genre, you could say. It is a complete blend of everything. There's really moments of thriller, horror, family wholesomeness, comedy. Like, it's really just a whole mix of everything. And what I appreciate about Spielberg is he confines Jurassic Park to the conventions of whatever genre he's trying to fulfill during a particular scene. Oscar and Alex touched on this with the night and day. There's a noticeable shift in tone when he wants to drive a horror or thriller component. When there's something on edge or tense, it's definitely darker at night, kind of more looming atmosphere. And again, that's just kind of attributed to his skills as a filmmaker. Again, you see the same thing. There's that whole kind of family father-son moment when that car is falling out of the tree. That's a really wholesome moment. Or when they have to sleep in the tree as well, and then they see the dinosaurs obviously the morning after. That's a very wholesome moment. And then again, comedy is interwoven throughout. Like Malcolm's character, I would say, is probably the funniest in terms of his delivery and one-liners, but there's a bunch of comedic moments throughout. So I think just the fact that this is able to blend through each genre so perfectly and abide by those conventions so perfectly, it's clear that Spielberg is a student of the game. And I just really appreciate that component of his directing style. But I'm kind of harping on the same stuff here, so I can hand it over to Ryan.
Yeah, all the points she's made were really good. Like, some people do consider like Jurassic Park a horror film. I don't agree with that, but the blend that he has with all of the genres is just so good. And going back to Alex, what said about the kind of aspect ratio that they had, Spielberg shot this kind of at a 185 by 1 aspect ratio, so it had more space vertically, and that really works so well during like the dinosaur scenes. Like if you were to convert them like to how films are normally shot, in that first dinosaur scene, you wouldn't even see the human characters in that shot, because that's how little they are in that like frame, which is just really sets up the scale and everything about the dinosaurs so well. I think that's really so great about Spielberg's framing in general in this film. But yeah, I think you summed it up all pretty well. So back to you, Alex.
Yeah, so before we get into some scene breakdown, I think we can't not comment on the way this film changed the game with CGI, and it was really the first film to really pioneer use of computer-generated images, and if you've watched our prior episodes, you know that me personally, I'm not a big fan of this change in the industry, and I think it's definitely become overused, but it's funny how the CGI in this still looks so much better than a lot of what we see today. And I think part of that is because Spielberg is smart enough to, one, the way he blends the practical with the CGI and kind of really only because CGI has more fluid motion than a lot of the practical effects, such as stop motion, or animatronics. The CGI motion, the characters can move more fluidly, but you also lose this kind of real texture to them. Paul Tibbett, who is one of the famous stop motion animators who did most stop motion films in history, did a test run of the stop motion for the dinosaurs, and obviously it's unfinished, but I actually do think it looks a little better. Obviously, the CGI motion is a little more fluid, like I said, but I think the practical stop motion figures do look more real than the CGI, but Spielberg still keeps those CGI dinosaurs in the dark. And by keeping them in the dark, it kind of hides the texture flaws of the technology and the visual effects, which makes it hold up a lot better than just these bright, constantly everything CGI in the superhero movies today, where they're overusing it, so they're putting even less time to perfect the texture, and it just never really looks real. Even when the stop motion and animatronics don't look real in some films, they look very real here. Like the T-Rex looks like actually real. Well, it is actually real, but it's insane how good the T-Rex looks. But yeah, and then it's, this film comments on things going extinct, and it's funny because they said like Grant's out of the job now that they've been able to resurrect dinosaurs, and this actually came from a conversation Spielberg had with Paul Tibbett, the stop motion animator, where he said, "You're out of the job," when they discovered what the CGI could do. And it also really just kind of, Scorsese's talked about the idea of theme park movies, and although I think this is both a theme park movie and an artistic movie, it definitely kind of, Spielberg understood the future of where cinema was going to go with a more theme park consumerism approach to a lot of the big scale films. So I think you could also, as the film comments on a world-changing event within the world of the film, it very much is also commenting on the changes in the industry, which we've now seen the effects of very much these years later. But I'll pass it off to Ryan.
Yeah, like you said, the pacing is so great in this film. Like the kind of like theme park ride, like it doesn't have like that point. At least for me, it was like, oh, we're kind of reaching the finale. That's like you can tell, like it's kind of just at a high the whole time, and it is kind of like that theme park ride in a way, not in a bad way that Scorsese will say about an MCU film or anything, but just in a way that it is fun and at a high the whole time. But yeah, the visual effects is probably one of the things that made this film age so well. Like films that came out 10 years after it just don't hold up the same as this, like just because of that perfect blend of practical and visual effects. And really, it's the key of really your immersion into the film as well. Like watching Jurassic Park, like you don't have to stop and think, oh, that's very dated, or that's clearly CGI, because it's generally hard to tell at times. And it's a big problem, especially with the sequels, that it really ages the films when you go back to watch them, because especially the second and third one, there's just scenes with dinosaurs where it's just fully CGI and it really stands out. But yeah, like Alex was saying, like they looked to stop motion originally for the dinosaurs, but Spielberg was really insistent on using that revolutionary like CGI that especially was reaching that point in the 90s where visual effects were entering that next level, and they would have they would have been making Jurassic Park obviously during when James Cameron, the goat of CGI, the goat of cinema in general, released Terminator 2, which also showed off just how good that CGI could be. So I think that definitely made Spielberg definitely make that edge to just like implementing it into this film. But yeah, it just even the small stuff, like the part when the T-Rex is introduced and the water ripples, like they did that by using a guitar string attached to the ground, like to the car, and they would pluck it and that would make the water ripple. Like nowadays they would just CGI that in post, like they wouldn't actually like have to think about it or like think of a way to do it practically. But that really adds just to the magic of the film in general. Yeah, I mean that's all I've got to say. What about you, Will?
Yeah, just in terms of CGI, I have a little bit of a different outlook than you guys. I think the CGI doesn't age super well. I think definitely in the 90s when it came out and even 2000s, it was revolutionary, cutting edge. Just consistent with Spielberg's career, he's always on the cutting edge of technology and filmmaking in general. But I don't think it stands out as like a focal point or like a super impressive part of the film. But he shoots it in a way that kind of hides it, but also showcases it. So like what Alex and I kind of talked about earlier with like kind of letting the audience imagine these different dinosaur interactions and not actually showing them face value, perfectly cut, center frame, and all that. He's more selective with how he shows the dinosaurs, and I think that's to the CGI's benefit. But here's that one really kind of majestic moment at the very beginning. We get that low angle sweeping shot of the Brachiosaurus or whichever dinosaur is eating the leaves from that tree way up above. So I think that is a moment of magic, and I think it does kind of stand out as a magic moment still, even though the CGI maybe nowadays isn't as seen as that spectacular. But I think it's a nice blend of, like you guys have been saying, practical CGI, a good use of filmmaking techniques to not having to lean on the CGI. But yeah, I think it's just overall a really good film for CGI and practical effects.
Was it that first dinosaur scene that like kind of stood out to you as being like dated?
Yes, the first one is like noticeably dated. The T-Rex scene is like pretty damn good.
Yes,
like it looks.
You can't tell.
Yeah, but it's that first dinosaur scene that looked a little bit old. But other than that, like I thought I was immersed. Like it didn't break my immersion at all. So I definitely didn't think it was.
I can see that, but I think it's even better than like the 2 and 3. Like it's even better than the CGI used in those.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. 2 and 3 stuff. Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I consider don't watch 2 and 3. Jurassic Park is not a trilogy. It is just a standalone film. Don't even watch the new ones. It's just Pratt holding his hands up. It's just Jurassic Park and Jaws. Don't even worry about the other one. But yeah, did we want to segue into that iconic T-Rex scene? I know a couple of you had some comments on that, or
Oscar have anything to say about that?
Oscar have any points there?
Oh yeah,
I kind of agree. Will, I don't think this kind of rewatching this. I don't think the CGI was fantastic, especially like you said, that first kind of dinosaur scene, kind of really noticeable. But I do disagree slightly with what Ryan said, kind of about setting in motion, kind of bad 2000 CGI, because I think there are some great CGI accomplishments in the 2000s. Kind of Pirates of the Caribbean, Lord of the Rings. Both have such impressive CGI for the time, and I know I'm definitely pro practical effects, absolutely, but I think even further on, even looking at kind of Planet of the Apes, which is a different kind of CGI, because obviously that's kind of the body suits differently, but I think the impact it's had, and whilst kind of down the road now it's had a negative impact, I think at high points in the 2000s it was actually really, really impressive. But yeah, the CGI for some of those scenes I think it's hit or miss in Jurassic Park. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, it's not really that the CGI in itself is amazing. It is just kind of just the ability of the filmmaker. Like the magic of it is like how they can hide it and like make it look like it's not like it is real. And like yeah, of course there is like cases of like great directors as well doing in the early 2000s. But I was more thinking about like a Matrix Resurrections or something where they just went full CGI and like they didn't even bother to try and hide out that that's when it really is aged. And I mean that's happened in a lot of films.
Spy Kids 3.
What?
Spy Kids 3.
Don't disrespect Spy Kids 3. That is the masterpiece of visual effects.
I love it, but it's some of the worst CGI ever. I still love it.
Dude, I saw that clip where he bites off the bars from that cage. Oh my god, that was awful. I did not remember it being that, but I guess it doesn't hold up. Did Oscar have to dip? Oh, okay.
I think he's good.
Hey.
Yeah,
so any more?
Yeah, any more other points?
I've got nothing to add. Yeah.
All right, let's get into some scene breakdown then. So I think one thing Spielberg does in this film that makes all these scenes so good, there's so many different great scenes we could talk about, is that he never holds a positive story beat for too long. If there's any moment of safety or like touching, like nice sentimental moment, it is interrupted very quickly by some form of conflict. There's pretty much conflict from start to finish, and it's normally very high stakes conflict. And I know we all want to talk about the T-Rex scene, but before we get into that, I personally at least want to talk about the death of Dennis Nedry scene. Nedry is the guy who sells he tries to sell the dinosaur plants to another company, and like we mentioned, sets most of the conflict in motion. And I think the scene where he dies is just so incredibly well directed by Spielberg. The way first he has the conflict of the weather with the big storm, which was actually shot in an actual hurricane. It was an actual hurricane while they were filming, and they actually shot some scenes in a real-life hurricane, and I'm pretty sure this is one of those scenes. And so we talk about nature finding a way, and it's almost like nature finds a way to punish him for his greed and motivations. And nature creates the first conflict for him of crashing the car and getting stuck in the mud. And then when he gets out, we don't see the raptors. We're watching him from a distance, and like I talked about, there's that obstructed view of like we see bushes and things in the foreground, and it just creates this presence of danger. We don't know why yet, but we just feel it, that there's some kind of danger present. And it's almost like a distant observer of him that's watching and kind of lurking on him. And then we hear the kind of the tapping communication between the I know they're not, I don't know what exactly called. I'll just call them raptors for now, even though they're a little different with the ink. And then also real quick about Nedry is how he's there's no personal connection between him and any of the characters like we see in so many films, where he doesn't even really interact with any of the characters except for Hammond. It's nothing personal. It's just he's just someone who kind of sets the conflict in motion. Oh shit! Someone who kind of sets the conflict in motion. And yeah. So then, also when the raptor eventually kind of spreads its whatever you call the wing-like things, he frames Nedry very tightly in the frame, showing us visually the danger he's in. And then just kind of this brief moment of safety where he gets in the car before the raptor pops up. And then we just see, like I said, Spielberg with his off-screen suggestion, but here it's on-screen but off-screen at the same time, where we just have the truck shake. Like Oscar mentioned, like this scene as a kid is like pretty terrifying. And it's on-screen but off at the same time by, like I said, the danger, when things shake in this movie, that normally implies some form of danger. And we just have that's the way he graphically kills him with sound on-screen. But at the same time, then, all right. Graphically kills him on screen with the shake just by the sound design, but then also in terms of, in addition to the suspense he creates, tilts down to the can, which has the plans and is very symbolic in the film because it's almost like the MacGuffin that sets the story forward, and just has the mud just dripping down on it as it's like sitting in a puddle of mud, and like when his life's on the line, he no longer cares about the greed or everything that got him here in the first place. He doesn't even care about the can anymore. He's just trying to save his life. And just the mud dripping down on that can, I think, is just such brilliant poetic imagery from Spielberg. But I'll pass it off to Will.
I think there's so many scenes in Jurassic Park that stand alone that's fantastic. And you can really just segment this film into 24, 30 great standalone scenes that just seamlessly interweave. But like the one that stood out to me, I'll kind of break the fourth wall here, is the iconic T-Rex scene. It's just like the perfect encapsulation of danger, fatherly instinct, human versus nature, and Spielberg's just able to wrap that up so tightly and bundle it into this scene so perfectly. Just the pouring rain, everything is so perfect. The blue undertones, the color palette is exceptional as well, and even just like the moments, like it's a pretty subtly acted film in terms of the main characters. Like there's not a lot they have to do. I guess maybe that's not true. I don't know. There's the main characters don't burden the entire story necessarily, so it's not like they needed to put on this massive performance to make the film so successful. I think their performances are kind of subtly great in the sense that it's the little things that kind of pay off, like when they're forced not to move, and Sam Neill puts his hand over the daughter's mouth, basically saying, "Don't move, don't move." He goes into complete father mode. He instills that maternal instinct, like Ryan said. And then when the T-Rex is kind of spinning the turned over van, turned over Jeep around them, and they're maneuvering around that, that's a perfectly shot scene. Spielberg knows exactly where to show and pan. Again, he uses that camera movement pretty flawlessly throughout this scene. But there's so many different details and scenes that could go on. But I'll pass it off to Ryan if he's got a scene he wants to get into.
Yeah, definitely. Like the scene Alex was talking about, that is one of the many horror scenes I think in the film, and that it really is a shock, like how many people actually die in this film. Like looking back on it, because you wouldn't expect it to be that gruesome. I don't think it's really that many deaths in the other movies. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely the standout scene in the film for me is that T-Rex scene that Will was talking about. Like this really is the scene that implement or say it as being kind of like a horror film that people consider, because witnessing that T-Rex scene in the theatre really made me understand that, because it really is a horror scene put in the middle of the movie, and we don't have that magic of John Williams' score at that point anymore to kind of like hide behind like all the other dinosaur scenes. We've got that score in the background kind of telling us how to feel, but it's just silent here. We just have the rain and this terrifying roar of the T-Rex, and Spielberg is just a master of blending the practical effects here, and it's such essential to pulling you right into that scene from the start. And there is no signs of like dated CGI like I was talking about, and like the take you out of the film, and is really important. It really makes you focus on just being scared in the moment and being scared for the character's safety. And if you didn't already know who like survived, if this wasn't a rewatch for most of us, like there is that sense of danger as well, like because of the high amount of deaths, like you don't really know who is in danger and who's not, and it kind of sets that tone really early on that characters can actually be hurt. Like there's obviously that lawyer that goes in the toilet, and I think he was a lawyer, and he actually gets killed in that scene as well. But yeah, I think it's definitely the best scene in the film for me. Which Alex, you were talking about how they actually shot it in a storm. This scene, I'm pretty sure, was actually shot on a soundstage, which is crazy. That they actually were able to replicate that, because it really looks like it's in like a forest or something, like you were saying, like they actually shot it. But yeah, it's just incredible filmmaking. That you can recreate an outside environment like that of that scale inside, and all the weather effects and everything. It's mental. Sweet. Yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. Oh yeah. Just with the scene about the kids as well, and that T-Rex scene, that's really where the kids and Alan start to like really connect. And this is really a scene that's is really different when you go back to watch Spielberg's films now. After The Fabelmans, I don't know if you've all seen it, but there's a real sense we get to see his early childhood in that, and like kind of learn about his like trauma with his parents, about getting divorced, and there really is a lot of like that in his films that you see. And there's the little girl, I don't remember her name, but she is really dealing with the trauma of her parents getting divorced, which is like they do mention at the start. It is something that you can miss quite easily, but it is something that I was looking out for, because I was thinking about Spielberg's life after The Fabelmans. And yeah, the kids are really just dealing with their parents, and there's that scene where she's screaming, the left does, and you think initially it's just that lawyer running away. But Spielberg spends so much time on it that it really does have to mean something else, and it really is just that girl dealing with the kind of splurring out like all her trauma from her parents getting divorced in that scene. That is just so good, like the kind of hidden meaning behind it, like just a simple scene like that you wouldn't even think about if you didn't know about it. But yeah, it just changes your perspective on a lot of things in these films. And yeah, going back to that T-Rex as well, like it just really is the motivation for changing Alan completely out of the film. And then just even outside the T-Rex scene, like I'll just leave that. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, so Oscar, do you have anything to talk about your favourite scene from the film?
Yeah, I'll talk about a different scene. I think the raptor kitchen scene is just so well made. Probably the jump scare that got me most is the kind of the start of not the kitchen scene, but kind of the scene with the raptors, because it kind of travels and moves along with Laura Dern's character. You kind of know, you kind of a split second before you kind of know it's going to happen because of the framing. You got kind of the things like the wiring behind and the characters on the right of the frame. But I think it's really well done how it kind of starts with the adult characters, and then it moves along to the child characters, and we become kind of a lot more fearful because it's the child characters and it's on their own and it's a really dangerous situation. I think Spielberg kind of heightens that sense of tension really well between those two scenes, and obviously kind of the start of that, there's a really good kind of use. He doesn't kind of show us straight away. He kind of uses shadows across the dining area, and kind of good juxtaposition is kind of the look on their faces, the girl when she realizes what's behind them, and they kind of reminded me of Laura Dern's face when she first sees the dinosaurs. Obviously kind of two different emotions, but the facial expressions are quite similar. But yeah, the scene's just so well done. Kind of Alex mentioned before, really good use of misdirection with that, with the mirror and the iconic kind of shot of the projector on that dinosaur's face. If you've made it into the Babylon end scene, it's going to be good. Minus Avatar though.
Whoa, Avatar
yeah.
catching a stray? Whoa.
That wasn't necessary.
It was necessary.
Wait, what was that? I missed it.
I was just saying because the raptor scene with the projection made it into like the end montage of Babylon, and I was saying, when you've made it into that, it's going to be good. And I said minus Avatar because that's in there as well. But yeah, I think that kitchen scene's just kind of really, really, really well built up throughout, and it's put in really well because we haven't really seen the kids kind of on their own in that extremely dangerous situation, but it's handled with very well. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah, and Ryan, that was a really great point about the divorce with the lawyer running away, because I actually never thought about that, but the divorce is definitely something that's been a theme in a lot of Spielberg films for his entire career. But I think this film does something truly unprecedented in Spielberg's filmography that I don't think I noticed until my recent watch in theaters, and that is that I think this is the first Steven Spielberg movie where John Williams is not the MVP. And don't get me wrong, Jurassic Park is one of the best scores ever. The theme is incredible. But the MVP is Gary Rydstrom, the sound designer. What he does with creating these dinosaur sounds and just using sound to tell this story is the first time that I think anyone in the Steven Spielberg movie has outshined John Williams. And I want to be clear, that is no criticism of John Williams in any way. He did phenomenal work on this film. He's arguably the greatest composer in history. Gary Rydstrom just brought his absolute A game in this. Just the way he layers animal sounds, and he didn't use any existing sound library sounds for this. He recorded all new, fresh sounds on his own for this to create a unique feel for it. And I think one scene that really highlights this is when they feed the raptors off screen and it descends down. I think we talked about it a little bit with like the bushes shaking, but this scene was the one that terrified me the most as a kid. And it's just so terrifying hearing them rip the cow to shreds. And as a kid, it's scary and like you look away, but it's a scene where like a lot of like terrifying movies or terrifying scenes in film, you can kind of look away if it scares you, but you can't even look away because it's all in the sound that you hear. So there's no escaping the horror of that scene, which just makes it so much more effective. But in addition to that, I can't not talk about the brilliant T-Rex scene, which holds up so perfectly today. Most of the T-Rexes, we should give a shout out as well to Stan Winston, who is a legendary animatronics artist in just the film industry as a whole, who did the T-Rex, and Spielberg calls the puppeteers who control the T-Rex. There was a bunch of them, the unsung heroes of the film, which they absolutely are. And, Will talked about setups and payoffs in this film, and he has a great one just to set the tone with the T-Rex with the goat, where they're feeding the goat, and then Grant has the line about hunting versus being fed, and then we kind of forget about the goat for a bit. And then just the leg, just the bloody leg just hits the roof of the car. And the scene is just Spielberg creating the suspense so well in all visually, like we talked about, the way the water glass shakes, and then just the lawyer, the way he slowly tilts his head up. And he does so much just to build it before that T-Rex reveal. We have the sign swinging then. which just that motion of it is creating a certain feeling in the audience. And then he match cuts it inside to behind the obstructed wet window, and then just slowly like cranes up out of the car to reveal the T-Rex for the first roar. And it's just one of the most intense moments in any film I've ever seen. The way he obstructs the T-Rex with water and the way the constant rainy storm sound also just adds more unsettling tension. Like, this is a very dangerous scene with, I think, pretty much no score. It's all in the sound design here. And a lot of it's actually very quiet. Like, even once we hear that first T-Rex roar, there's so much quiet tension even after that. Like, we see the doors open in the car, and it's like, it just feels very vulnerable how it's like there's that even though it's like the safety really is that door, it just feels so much more dangerous having that door open. So Tim makes a decision, he shuts the door, and then the T-Rex head just jolts super quick, and now it's just ramping up the suspense even more. And we have that like really tense eye to eye between the dinosaur and the kids. The dramatic irony of Grant saying, you know, it's attracted to motion, and the kids who can't hear Grant say that are waving the flashlight all around. And he reveals the dinosaur twice, because obviously first we have the glass shaking and the reveal to the kids, but then there's a second reveal to Grant and Malcolm where we just, like I said, just using non-human things to tell the story and Spielberg's visual storytelling, but by just having all the wires snap. And the wire, which is like a symbol of safety and a barrier between them and the T-Rex, is just disappearing, making the danger even higher. And just the way he builds up the whole scene. And then, of course, once the T-Rex attacks, it's terrifying because, like I say about CGI, like, the T-Rex looks real because it's real. It's right in front of them. The texture of it, like, everything about that is real and exists in the real world. Even if the movements may not be as realistic to you as CGI, like, it is still something that exists in the real world. And then, like we talked about, Spielberg takes it a step further by, once they're kind of off of that cliff and not in danger of being eaten by the T-Rex, they're still in danger of T-Rex-caused conflicts, such as the T-Rex pushing the truck down could knock them down and kill them. So just the conflict of the T-Rex mixed with T-Rex-caused conflicts, the solution is not always just more dinosaurs and more CGI and all of that. Spielberg just knows how to create that high-stakes conflict unlike any other filmmaker, and being able to have those slow, suspenseful reveals. But I'll pass it off to Oscar.
Jokes? Never mind.
Pass it off to Oscar.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Alex has probably said everything about the T-Rex scene, but I just wanted to add another scene. Sorry. I'd actually completely forgotten. We haven't actually mentioned it. The scene that probably scared me the most as a child is the very, very first scene where the raptor. We didn't even see the raptor, which kills the guard. He kind of sucks him into the cage. That I just remember thinking about it as a child every night. It just absolutely terrifies me. We didn't even see the dinosaur at all. And it's the scene that kind of stuck with me most. And it's right at the beginning. Which just goes to show kind of what everyone else has been saying. The dinosaur's only 15 minutes of screen time, and the way he uses them is just absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I don't think I had anything else to add about the T-Rex scene. You guys have kind of said everything about that.
Yeah, just going back to what Alex was saying about the T-Rex scene, like with the puppeteers with the dinosaur, like it really just adds so much that, like, it does look like a real dinosaur. And even just for the actors, it completely changes like how the whole film turns out. Like, nowadays actors would have probably be in a scene, they wouldn't be able to see anything, and they would just have to pretend that something would be happening, and it would just completely change the scene completely. But I know even with the T-Rex in the car, like when it goes through the window, like that wasn't supposed to happen. So like the kids screaming, like that's all like real reactions. So it all just adds to like the whole, like, kind of just the whole vibe of the film. Like the actors are fully immersed into it, so it really helps you get immersed into it. But yeah, well, did you have anything to add?
Nope, not particularly. I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. It's just like this immersive realism that you get with the animatronic T-Rex, and that scene, the tension, everything about it just completely sucks you in. So I think we've hit everything about it. It is a perfect scene.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, can I add something about the CGI? Like I think it was the puppeteer said to Spielberg after it that they're extinct now, which is kind of funny but pretty sad.
Puppeteers are extinct? Like the people who do the puppeteering?
Yeah, I think he said like they're going to be extinct now that after they've seen how good the CGI was.
Yeah, and we mentioned
Dungeons and Dragons film coming in first. They use animatronics. That was so nice to see this year.
Yeah, we mentioned some of the unsung heroes, such as Stan Winston, who did the animatronics. Phil Tippett, even though there is no stop motion used, was a lot of input on the movement of the dinosaurs and just a lot of kind of guiding the way the scenes went, even though they didn't use any actual stop motion. But one other name I think we should mention is Dennis Muren, who kind of led the CGI of this film. That's just another name I think we should give a shout out to. But I think that pretty much wraps everything up. Jurassic Park, one of the best films ever. Top tier in the filmography of Steven Spielberg. Absolutely see this film in theaters if you can. I think I'm really going back and forth which is better, this or Jaws right now. It's so hard to pick. Jaws, I think, is Steven Spielberg's best accomplishment as a director, but I think his visual storytelling and just the more poetic imagery of Jurassic Park might be better. I really don't know. It's so difficult, but...
Okay, no, gun to your head. Jaws or Jurassic Park? Gun to your head. Alex, Jaws or Jurassic Park?
Jurassic Park. Maybe it's because I just watched it in theaters,
Oscar?
but I'm going with Jurassic Park.
Jaws any day of the week.
Ryan?
Yeah, Jaws for me. That's his number one film for me.
Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
So we get a 2-2 split. Let us know in the comments. Jurassic Park or Jaws? What Spielberg's better? But as always, follow all of our letterboxes. We're logging films like Jurassic Park. Alex goes to cinemas and gives full breakdowns. Oscar watches about 46 million movies every day. So go follow the socials. But that was our Jurassic Park episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a good one.